It's not going to be as like formal as the other videos that I've done for this. Just going to be quick and dirty. Gonna do the tier list, as you can see on your screen, for the Draft League Georgia VGC Season 1. Little tiny URL has access to this document, so any of you can check this out later, and I'll also post it in the Discord as well. But basically, this is just my overall opinion. It's kind of combining like how the drafts line up, like each Pokemon team selected, as well as with their kind of lining up with their performance. So you can compare this, what I have here, along with the leaderboard. You can also kind of compare it with the previous tier list that I did. Let me see, I'll pull that up real quick. It's the old document that I did before the season started. And for the most part, the opinions kind of remain the same. Where, like, I have Mocha's team at the top, Patillac and Strider's teams near the top, and then Eeveenescence, Esquire, and Luminary closer towards the C tiers at the bottom. So, like, there's a little bit of shuffling in the middle of everything, but overall, I think I've been pretty accurate towards it so far. Oops, scroll down too far. Now, a fun thing that I did for you guys, in case all the other players are watching later, I did... Wait, did I zoom in too far? Oh, I did these like little player cards, so you can kind of get like an at-a-glance type of feel for what each player has brought to the table. So like the full drafts currently after week 5, the current ranking, where I have them rated on the tier list, and even like a little view of what Pokemon they frequently brought, what they can kind of use. So I hope that is useful and kind of cool for you. Manny, did you have any opinions about how I ordered this? Oh, technical difficulties probably. Alright, I'll move on for now. So for starters, and Manny, you can just jump in whenever you're good to go. I know what's going on today. So Bazuk's team, I think, is kind of cool. There are a bunch of different synergies between... What's the best way to say it? There are a bunch of different pairings for this team.
For the most part, I would say that I agree primarily with Mocha.
Oh, you're breaking up again? Might want to update your Discord, buddy. Okay. Hold on. I got you. I got you. Hold on. Alright, kind of just keep going here. So with Bazuk's team, they've got a bunch of different mini synergies, like 2 Pokemon pairings. So offensively, they can just go ahead and get the ball rolling without too much setup. You can see that in some of their recent week's matches, where they favored Whimsicott and Arcanine. If you remember, Arcanine has Justified, so it's just been using Tailwind and Beat Up and just snowballing from like the immense advantage they gained from that. But outside of that, you can still do something like Tapu Koko and Alolan Raichu, just activate the Surge Surfer. Most teams will be pretty... They'll be pretty prepared for it. There's some insulation versus electric types in general for this league, but I mean, that's just one of the options I wanted to bring up. You also have Tyranitar's Sandstream to activate Sand Rush on both Lycanroc and Dracovish. And you also, there's some synergy with Whimsicott and even Duraludon to just run Tailwind Fake Tear Spam. I think that's one of the synergies that Bazuk used as well. So overall, it can just get a huge speed and power advantage right off the bat. The only issue I would say is defensively, it doesn't seem all that well shored up. So if plans fall earlier in the game, it's hard for them to kind of like claw their way back out, because if they ever lose the speed advantage, they're kind of losing out. I believe which week was that? Week 3 versus Patillac, the 0-2 loss, they tried to take out the Celestealer early. They were using Dragonite, maxed it early, and didn't quite have the damage to finish off. Now they were leading Whimsicott along with it to get the speed advantage from Tailwind, but even that wasn't enough, because they just used their Tornadus in return and Icy Winded it. So just constantly falling behind. So if they ever lose that advantage, that's the trouble that the team has. So cohesively, I think it's a little bit shaky, and that's why I ranked it a little bit lower. And they're currently number 5 on the leaderboard, kind of aligning with that middle of the pack feel.
I would agree, actually. Finally got my mic all figured out. I think this team offensively has a decent bit of coverage, in addition to just being able to, as you said earlier, steamroll. But that defensive typing, again, just isn't going to hold up against some of the better teams in this draft.
There you go. There you have it. Also, what are opinions on these little player cards? Because I didn't put a lot. I'm not gonna say oh man, I put so much effort in it. Praise me. If it's a cool idea, I'd like to bring it back in other formats and anything that I do here. Moving along though, Bruneaux's draft sitting at the lower end of the standings in the C tier. When we first started this season, I thought this could be one of the better teams, mainly because it had some clear identities, if that makes sense. Because when I look at, for example, Esquire's draft, this is one thing I always point out. I was never always sure of what it was going to be doing. But with Bruneaux, you can see some synergies with Trick Room. Even previously, it had the male Indeedee, so we can even set up Trick Room from there. And Trick Room on Psychic Terrain in itself is already kind of powerful. You stop any Fake Out or Prankster taunts from coming in that would normally prevent you from setting up Trick Room. You synergize with the Hatterene, start doing Expanding Force Spam. Those are all options to you. And then on the flip side, if you really want to, you can run Dragapult and Togekiss, kind of a classic pairing. You don't really have a ton of power through that if they're really insulated against physical damage. But again, just shows you they can operate on both modes. I think one of the main concerns I had at the start was with the Gmax Blastoise. I wasn't 100% sure how good of an impact it would have against the rest of the draft. I don't think we've gotten to see optimal use of it, but I do think it's one of the stronger parts of the team, just because as you scroll through and look at the other drafts, there's not a lot of water types, or at least not a lot of water types that players are typically bringing to these matches. So firing off a Gmax Cannonade can pretty much go uncontested for the most part. Outside of that, it's got a little bit of a wild card element. They brought in Sill Valley, which you can kind of cater to your different needs, and we can even show it. He threw off Patillac in week 4, boasting the what was it? Normal Gem Explosion moveset on just the normal Sill Valley. So that was pretty fun. But yeah, mainly just looking at it, it seems like Trick Room is the main thing he wants to take advantage of, but we haven't seen it overwhelm anyone just yet.
Yeah, the draft, I think there are a lot of pieces here to this draft that are actually very, very powerful, namely the Togekiss Dragapult. Obviously the Blastoise adds a lot of pressure. Glastrier making its return from, I believe it was Series 7 or so, that it was really taking off in VGC. I think the tools are here to get Trick Room up problem that I've seen in this draft has really been with the week by week team building. I feel as though Bruneaux may not be capitalizing entirely off of the tools that they have available to them in some of their draft formats, kind of lacking that identity that we previously mentioned, and not really knowing what mode it's wanting to go for, whether it being the faster Dragapult mode, utilizing maybe Savali in some kind of way, or really pigeonholing themselves into this like Ferrothorn, Hatterene, Mimikyu, like Trick Room style team. But I believe if they are able to figure out some of those quirks with the team going these last 2 weeks, they may, come out on top. We'll see.
Yeah, we got like a lot of ground to make up though. Because see, the number 11 with 1 win, they're gonna have to straight win out, I believe. Let's see. Yeah, with like a -4 difference here. Yeah, it's gonna require, some significant losses somewhere in the middle of the pack. If they get like some clean 2-0s in the last 2 weeks, it's possible they end up with a 6th place slot to make it in the playoffs. But yeah, it'll take some work though. Not gonna lie.
True.
All right, next up, Eeveenescence. First off, I hate saying this name 5 times fast. Second of all, I do like how it kind of stayed on brand, and despite that, it still has some cool quirks as a team. I think I keep saying it week after week. I forget a lot of my words a lot of the time, but I think this excels at slowing down the pace of the game well enough that if you just constantly chip away, and position the offense on the back end of the games, it can potentially come out on top more often than not. The main problem I have, though, if I'm looking at it that way, is that there's a lack of offense that you do want to position at the end of the game. Like, you can start with, Ensign, Gothitelle, Ensign, Suicune, start snarling, start parting shotting, and like you've gutted the enemy offense, right? But then in the back, you really mainly only have, like Centiskorch to G max. You may have like Snorlax if you really want to max as well. But because you're not really gaining any speed advantages, like unless you're using Trick Room from Gothitelle or Tailwind on Suicune, and even then Tailwind really only benefits Thundurus, if I'm being honest. Thundurus, Lucario, if you chose to use that. It makes this really awkward in game. It's hard to see Centiskorch providing that big of a benefit if you take advantage of that. Now, what they've been doing though, she's been recently maxing Thundurus straight off the bat in the beginning stages of the game, which feels a little bit suboptimal. Only because there's not like a lot supporting that offense. Like you can use like Helping Hand from Umbreon, Sylveon, Vaporeon if you really want to. But I don't think those are really capitalizing off of Thundurus's strength. Especially since they've taken the Incineroar. Normally it's there to prevent like Intimidates from affecting other physical mons. So for example, if you want to make Lucario a main part of your offense, or saving the Centiskorch, you put the Thundurus right next to it, and it deters Intimidates from coming in. But like I mentioned, you already have the Incineroar, and there are only so many other Intimidates that you want to bring in. 2 of which Strider has in their team, Landorus, Therian, and Hitmontop. So you're not really going to take advantage of that all that often. That being said, if they can take advantage of like some of the larger parts of their bulk and kind of like stall out to that end game, or even just like set up do like a cool setup like Lucario with coaching into Snorlax, just as an example, right? That's something that you might be able to take advantage of and catch people by surprise.
Yeah, this team, from a defensive standpoint, obviously is fantastic with Gothitelle, Umbreon, Incineroar, Suicune. As you said before, able to slow down opposing teams like effortlessly. But again, that offensive pressure, it's not really there. The Thundurus is being asked to do a lot. And its speed tier is kind of awkward with the rest of the team, just given the fact that nothing else really wants to go fast. So then you're torn between this dichotomy of, do I go for the on the offensive with Thunderous? Am I trying to pivot for Trick Room with the Snorlax? It may turn to a situation where you might want to look into capitalizing off of this Gothitelle more and really like, in addition to slowing down the opponent's offense in the early game, you may want to look into being able to cripple them, whether it be with Hypnosis, or just typical Shadow Tag, parting shot spam with Yawn, or whatever else you want to incorporate into that. Really trying to position for a late game sweep where you're not really afraid of the opponent being able to retaliate quickly, in addition to slowing down their general offense. And the team has the tools in some capacity, but it really, you have to decide early on what it is that you want to use as your offensive threat, I think, with this team, which is the slight downfall in this regard.
And I appreciate you mentioning the Gothitelle. I forgot to touch on that one because I think some of the games where it has been used were either not recorded or I just like glossed over it. Because even today we just had the day 2 from the Indie regionals, and one of the top placing teams was using Gothitelle with eject button Incineroar, which was pretty fun. So maybe that's something you can kind of draw from to use to your advantage. But I'm not here to tell anyone how to use their team. So.
Of course,
right.
Of course.
Now, funnily enough, we're still dealing with the lower end of the tier list, even though it's alphabetical order, so bear with that. Esquire's team, I'll say it for probably the 25th time. Not fully sure what its goals are. However, they did make some trades over the past few weeks that gives it a little bit more of an identity, mainly and just honing in on the Pelipper that it picked up. So now normally they would have their Crobat just set up Tailwind, set up Rain Dance, and just to support both Venusaur and Kingdra, which is not really efficient. I mean, there's not too much that the Crobat is going to be doing outside the Tailwind anyway, so I think it was a good thought for what they had initially. But having the Pelipper there just to automatically activate Swift Swim on Kingdra on its own, I think is of benefit, because you don't necessarily have to lead it. You can bring it in later, especially against some of the other weather teams, like Papi Cantan has Sandstream available, Strider has Sun available, so I think that's going to be important for the Weather Wars, especially since you're not rocking like Prankster Sunny Day or Prankster Rain Dance or anything. You also have, I think the Lapras has gotten underutilized, but I think it's also hard to efficiently use. Like, it's not going to be picking up KOs left and right, but if it's supporting a strong piece, then it's with the Gmax Resonance, then it has some benefit. But that's where you run into some trouble. Like, there isn't anything that's overly powerful on this team. You can look at Raikou, you can look at the Bisharp. The Bisharp, I think, is awkwardly enough kind of a star for the team. And I'm not saying that just because of that 1 week where it just kind of rolled over a team after getting like, what was it, +4 or +6 boost, I'm not sure. But just in general, its typing is really cool for battling against Dynamax. When you take into account that it gets Defiant, and you look at all the max moves that lower your stats, so Max Wormwind, Phantasm, Flutterby, except for the Flutterby, and even that, it takes neutral, it resists all those, even Max Strike. So if you start maxing that versus Pokemon that want to use those max moves, I think it has a pretty decent bit of value on this team. And then last but not least, I'll hone in on Clefairy. I think that's gone underutilized as well. Like, you could do things like pair with Raikou, start using Follow Me with Calm Mind. If you really want to, maybe even toss in Life Orb, Lapras, put it next to that. And then the combination of Gmax Resonance and Friend Guard is just like one idea of like how this team can look a little bit more scary.
I agree on all those fronts. I think this team honestly speaks to the creativity of Esquire. Looking at it just from a rough standpoint, there's not much that looks like it truly synergizes on the face of it all, outside of Pelipper, Kingdra, things of that nature. But they've strung together a couple wins here and there and presented some really interesting drafts. I think there was the one time the Hitmonchan with the Assault Vest on it, playing into different matchups. The Bisharp as always has been the star, as you mentioned before. This team, it's really gonna take the pilot knowing what they want to do with this gaggle of Mons and putting a show on. Because honestly, the lack of synergy on the face value also can throw off the opponent in terms of not knowing what they're gonna bring week by week. There's a lot to be desired on the face of this all, but at the same exact time, there's so much that we don't know about the team in terms of utilization outside of the obvious things, such as the G-Max Lapras, as mentioned before, that we truly won't know. We'll see every week.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's the main thing going for is the unpredictability, and I'm not going to get into it right now, but that's kind of one of the things I was looking for in all of the drafts is how creative you can be, how flexible each mon can be to kind of adjust for each matchup, but we'll probably touch more on that later. All right, and then next up, Luminary. I've got them at a C+ tier. Currently, they're ranked 10 after kind of having a rough start to the season, and then picking up a win just recently in week 5. I do not hate this team. I think that it has some relatively strong, consistent pieces. Like, you can immediately see Grimmsnarl, Cinderace, Tapu Fini. You could even say, kind of on a lesser level, the Alolan Persian, Serena, and just a slightly less level, the Duraludon, which I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little bit confused as that being the G-Max option that was selected. It gets its G-Max move is the Dragon type. I forget what it's called, but it reduces the opponent's power points. But even still, like, all of these are not terrible mons in this particular format. You can even say the Grimmsnarl synergizes with the Duraludon to kind of mount the same offense that Bazuk had with Whimsicott and their Duraludon, right? But I don't think, just the same was with Esquire's team, there isn't anything that I would call overly powerful. And I think that's some of the trouble that it's running into. It found some success, I think it was week 2. I think that's the week they picked up a win. With Tapu Fini, they made it an offensive variant supported by the Grimmsnarl, which was definitely a viable option, so I'm not going to knock on it. I think overall the synergy between these mons is where it's lacking. Like, there aren't a ton of like 2 Pokemon combinations like Bazuk may have. You don't have like any top tier Pokemon like what I consider Spectre on the higher end of the chart, or Glastrier. This is Series 9 that we're talking about. So it's not like you have to position well enough to where mainly Cinderace and Tapu Fini are doing well. Or you can try to pivot into a Trick Room mode, because you do have Mudsdale, Conkeldurr, the Cursula, and the Jellicent all work in that mode. And thanks to our good Professor Walnut in the chat, they also picked up the Alolan Executor, which I don't think was too well advised, but again, still an option that can be used. As a Dragon type, might be worthwhile into some of the rain modes that a couple of our teams have. I think this team has potential to be a higher tier, which is why I gave it like C+ instead of putting at the very lower end. But I think it's the performance that has to come out of Luminary to really optimize these Pokemon that we're not seeing just yet. They still have a chance to do so, and I think they have the tools to do so, but it'll be up to them.
Agreed. I think this team demands very specific lines, just given the nature of the Pokemon. Both holding this there's a pseudo really strong defensive core between the Fini, Alolan Persian, and the Grimmsnarl, I would say. And you can even go so far as to say possibly the Jellicent, depending on the condition, whether it uses Strength Sap or something in that regard. But the main offense again is really looking like it's coming from both the Cinderace, the Mudsdale in some respects, the Duraludon, which again, interesting G-Max choice, but if it works, it works. And I think those specific lines really pigeonhole the team in terms of how they are able to approach specific matchups. And it's going to be kind of a challenge on the trainer itself to figure out how they want to approach week by week. But the tools are there.
Yeah, like they can do it. I legitimately believe like they've shown like with their match versus Patillac, they have the ability to do it, but I just want to like see them pull out all the stops for the remaining weeks. I'll have to check in with Bruneaux as well if they have any more. If there's still time to do trades, there's some other things that they can look at, mainly in the Gmax department, I'd say, but it might be worth to keep Duraludon down around just to have at least a steel type, which I think is valuable, especially if you want to start spamming max steel spikes.
Sure.
Yeah, it'll be up to them if they want to do that.
Definitely, and I think the one thing going for the team especially is this Grimmsnarl being able to have both the defensive and that offensive pressure, whether it be the screens variant or something with fake tiers, or even maybe something if we forego the Feeny and go something like a Thunderwave, possibly even going like Trick Iron Ball or Eject Button or something. I think there are a lot of options here. It's really just going to come down to the week by week and how they choose to play it.
Agreed. Let's see. Next one up, we've got arguably my favorite draft, Mocha's draft. All right, I'm gonna tell you why I've been kind of jock riding this team so hard. I had intended to enter this competition. Not sure what happened with my entry form. No harm, no foul. It's whatever. But I was trying to plan out how I was going to draft. Literally, these first three Pokemon are the ones that I was thinking of. I was gonna sneak in the Spectrier because it's a Series 9, and I don't think any of the players were necessarily thinking about it. I was gonna try and combine it with the Metagross and start doing Bulldoze weakness policy stuff, which they did do in the earlier weeks. And then it just made sense to have Grimmsnarl if I could get it. I wasn't planning that I would have access to Grimmsnarl by the time I picked both Spectre and Metagross, but Mocha being the wiser picked Grimmsnarl second.
I got a cheese so you can throw whatever else you want on there.
Exactly. And then just keep in mind the way that these are ordered are the order in which they selected their Pokemon. So from left to right, from top to bottom. So just looking at the flow of what they selected, they really shored up a lot of any potential weaknesses. Like you pick Metagross, Salamence is a really good partner for that, resisting most of what is weak to the ice moves, the ground moves, the fire moves. I'm sorry, I have that backwards. The fire moves and the ground moves certainly Salamence resists. On the flip side, Metagross resists the ice and rock moves and the dragon moves that Salamence would normally be weak against. And then you shore that up again with Swampert, who is then covered by Moltres. And then all these being Pokemon available in my favorite generation, Gen 3, that's where I have most of my prestige from. You'd actually see these three Metagross, Salamence, and Swampert kind of together in the same team. I'm already super excited, already hyped for this team. And then as I keep going along, I just keep picking all these different pieces that sometimes in these drafts you feel like some of the later Pokemon you pick are just there to fill the quota, right? There's not necessarily any intent to use it. But each of these Pokemon seem like they could have a purpose cohesively with each other. You can even see it in some of their selections. Like the only Pokemon they have not used so far are Moltres, and they brought that to one team, just didn't use it. The Rotom, the Pheromosa, and Mandibuzz. Everyone else has at least been brought along for the ride. So I'm just really impressed by this particular draft. Just covers all bases, is still strong offensively, great defensively. It's you consider it a bulky offense for the most part. Even though it doesn't really do a ton in regards to speed control. There's no Trick Room, there's no Tailwind, but with Grimmsnarl available, you don't really have to worry too much about that. Let's see. move on to Papa Shuckle in a second. Sorry, I'm having issues on my end. Let's see.
I think one of the things also that I really love about Mocha's draft, especially, is the fact that it really speaks to being offensive with almost every single mon, but also them being able to be defensive on the exact same front, so you're not forced into the situation where you feel pressure to max anyone in particular. There are just so many max options as well as support roles on the team to just really mix with the opponent while providing support for practically every single member of the squad.
And there you have it. S tier, ranked number 2, just behind Sanaito, after a slip up in week 5, but it was a good match. Definitely check that one out. And if you don't know, there is a YouTube channel for Georgia VGC Discord. Georgia VGC in general. So that's where most of these matches are highlighted. If I need, I can toss a link in the chat. All right, moving on. Papa Shuckle. All right, this is one of the teams I thought would have been S tier. That's how I rated it in my my last list. So this is another little bit of bias from me. It's got Talonflame on there. Talonflame is one of my favorite units, and I think is like underexplored in the current series even. Being the fastest priority Tailwind setter, Tornadus, Thundurus, and Whimsicott can never taunt it from using Tailwind at all. But one of the benefits, one of its strongest benefits, I think, is the fact that Max Airstream can also be priority with Gale Wings. That opens up a lot of options to just double tap Pokemon while still gaining a speed advantage before they can even act. Just for example, so you run into a Whimsicott, it's running Eject Button. You can simply max the Talonflame, target it with Max Airstream, and it's gone before it gets a chance to do any kind of prankster mess. So yeah, again, just a little bit of bias from me on that end, but also you have Urshifu and Regieleki, which arguably, outside of a restricted format, are some of the strongest Pokemon that I believe you can have. Unseen Fist is just a huge threat, and Regieleki with Transistor, if you don't have a ground type, it's hard to defend against, even if you resist it, right? And from there, you just have, you know, your typical Sun pieces that you'll see from like Rinya Sun here in Series 12. So you have G-Max Charizard, still another powerful unit that's hard to defend against, and the Gastrodon to kind of like shore up any weaknesses from there. So what this does, it makes like this really cool hyper offensive dynamic. Again, with the goal just being like, these are all hard to defend against, and you may have to overextend just to grab a KO or to not get KO'd yourself. But we see that Papa Shuckle had kind of an early, a slow start to the season. They're picking up with a 3-week win streak so far, and it has potential to still be, you know, ranked number 1. But I think the flow of the game so far, like even their loss against Sanaito, I think was in their advantage. I have to rewatch the video to figure it out. I think what it comes down to is the preparation for each matchup has been lacking a little bit, and so the matches look a little bit skewed, right? Yeah, again, I think it's still a strong team, but kind of combining all of that, like the performance of the player and the draft itself, is kind of middling out to being a B tier. It can rise. We'll see what happens the last 2 weeks, but that's where I landed at.
I would agree. I think one of the big things I would like to highlight as well is the team's somewhat lack of success when Charizard is not able to really be a key contender in the matchup. Not having to pivot into the more defensive side and not being able to rely on that offensive pressure from the Wildfire, from the Airstreams, you know, all that solar power damage coming out. The team is then forced to pivot more in a Lecky, Gastrodon, a Moongus kind of direction. And I think at that point, the game plan has to be airtight, you know, going into some of these teams and matchups, because it's kind of pivoting away from the A plan that you want to go with. But I think if they're able to figure that out and solve that in the next couple of weeks, they obviously have a shot at going for number 1 here. And I think the team overall is incredibly strong. from a hyper offense standpoint, they have amazing pressure that most teams can't realistically defend against, or if they do, they have to sacrifice a piece to negate some of that damage. But we'll see what happens.
I'm gonna make a bad joke here. You said the key, and you said GMAX Charizard, and they've been favoring Clef Key Charizard with each other recently. So,
it's quite a pairing.
I mean, which I think is fine, because like even if you're looking at if we're looking at Renya's son as an example, right? You can leave Grimmsnarl Charizard, max it, toss up some screens. Clef Key can do the same thing.
Underwave action in there as well.
Exactly. But what they've been also been doing, just to maintain weather control, they slapped Sunny Day onto the Clef Key.
Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, they have a game plan. I don't think it's a bad game plan. I think there's more that can be done to like cater specifically to who they're fighting against. I remember speaking with them after the match versus Sanaito, how we did some simulations versus Sanaito ourselves, and we came to the conclusion, hey, Galarian Darmanitan, if set up in the correct way, just kind of runs through the team at that time. Yeah, like that's really the only issue I'd have, I think. Otherwise, I think it's a really good team.
Yeah, I'd say so as well. I mean, I think Darmanitan is definitely a sleeper pick on the team. Its raw coverage and damage output is absolutely insane in the right conditions, and having the Tailwind, you're almost never going to be outsped by any other team in this format. Honestly, you have the Tailwind, you have the Alecki, it's all on your side. The only thing you don't have really is a solid way of getting Trick Room up, but in the event that you are playing against Trick Room, you have so many good pieces to throw underneath it, it doesn't necessarily matter. So I think Power Shuckle will definitely pull out some wins in these last couple weeks. I'm hopeful to see it.
Same here, I'm with you. Alright, getting to the latter half of this list. Papi Cantan. Alright. This is one I was kind of confused on at the start. They came in late to the draft, but they were able to immediately pick up, I think it was Galarian Weezing and Regigigas, right before picking Excadrill and Hippowdon. It's like, okay, off the top of that, I thought it was going to be a stronger team, or at least very difficult to deal with. They ended up trading the Weezing and Gigas away for Kartana and Volcarona. And we haven't seen much of the Kartana yet. Honestly, it's been the Excadrill show, and it's been swapping between Mold Breaker and Sandrush depending on their needs. So this is kind of a reverse situation of Papa Shuckle. I think cohesively as a team, it's not quite there. It has like some strong units that other players have to kind of watch out for. But I think it's kind of just lacking in general with cohesiveness, like with different synergy. Outside of like Sandrush, it's like who you're really pairing with each other to kind of capitalize off of the other. Mostly it's been Meowstic to do that. Like it supports the Excadrill, it supports the Urshifu. Heck, it's even supported the Clefable at one time, I believe. However, I think it's lacking as a team. They themselves have been preparing and playing in a manner that gives me hope that they can like go into these last weeks and pick up a couple of wins relatively easily. I think the example was their recent match against Strider, where we hadn't seen Latias come out yet, and then they immediately put it into play versus Strider and came away with a clean sweep. I think game 2, outside of Life Orb chip and I think, was it Hail? Might have been Hail chip. It went relatively untouched. So this is where I rate it as a B-, because again, overall as a team, I don't think it's quite up there with some of the teams that I do favor, but I think the player has shown that they're able to manipulate these pieces to eventually become a higher tier if they can pick up a couple more wins, show better results.
I can agree for the most part. I think this team, one of the things that when I look at it at face value, is I really do wish that we had a very solid Airstreamer. And we even saw in that match versus Strider, Latias pivoted towards picking up, I believe it was Air Slash, and using that max airstream there to maintain speed advantage, in addition to having, I believe, the Icy Wind or Ice Beam as well for the max Hailstorm. And I think this team, without that max airstreamer, is kind of forced to pivot into this like all or nothing plan sometimes, with like getting the extra drill into the proper position to sweep the team, or at least put up enough quakes or steel spike boosts to support the rest of the cast. Given that the team is in this awkward kind of like speed tier where like half the team is on the slower end of the spectrum, the other half of the team is faster, you kind of can pivot into Trick Room, but the synergy between the slow mons isn't necessarily there to support the whole entire game plan. But this Meowstick, I think it's proven to be the glue to hold everything together. In addition to the Sand Rush Excadrill, the Volcarona has proven its merit at different times. And I think they definitely have the capabilities to finish strong.
It's surprising that Meowstick is like the mon to support these teams and just some of his wins. Like you can even see like these are all going to 3 games, whether it's win or loss. And I think Meowstick's been a big part of that, putting the opponent in awkward spots. Like, so I look to that as another star there. Like both Meowstick and Excadrill are the highest usage mons. I mean, this is split between Primarine and Urshifu as well, but it's on this higher list like for a reason. Those are kind of the 2 pivotal parts of the team.
Agreed. I think the prankster mons in a draft format in general just offers so much support shoring up those weaknesses, because you're never quite certain what's going to come from them. You're able to have defensive and offensive utility, and they really just provide this level of comfort and support for the pilot.
Agreed. Alright, Patillac, A tier, currently sitting number 4 on the leaderboard. This is also a team that I held in high regard. Again, if I'm looking at how the order in which they drafted their Pokemon, I like these first 3 a lot. Urshifu in general, whether it's Single Strike or Rapid Strike, is a good pickup for any team. Again, when we don't have restricteds to really contest against, we're dealing with a less of a health pool, less of a defensive stat pool, so it's easier for them to kind of shred through everybody. But I immediately thought that Celesteela was going to be kind of the star of the team. You can even see picking Raichu and Garchomp on the same team are testaments to that. They synergize really well with it. Any electric moves you want to target Celesteela with, Raichu deals with. Any fire type Pokemon that you want to use to deal damage with, Garchomp handles excellently. And it also benefits from the fact that it can use the Garchomp can use Earthquake with the Celesteela sitting next to it. So what ends up happening is you have this really cool hyper offensive dynamic where everyone synergizes just enough defensively that it's not at a loss if you like lose one part of your damage. If someone's there to kind of pick up the slack. Even using mons like Latios, Cinderace, they can all fill in, and you can use Tornadus as well to maintain speed control. I think when they lose that speed control though, that's where they can have some trouble, but it's still not a complete loss. Celesteela works in both speed modes, whether it's Trick Room or trying to set off Tailwind. I think it works well in that regard. Comfey, I think, has not been used yet, but same thing. It can support just fine from either mode.
Yeah, I think what most appeals to me with this team is a diverse offense. I mean, at a first glance, obviously, you look and you're like, okay, Celesteela show, we have support for it. It looks amazing, and in this kind of format, there aren't very many answers for a Celesteela maxing on you and spamming Steel Spikes or spamming Airstreams. But if you look even further than that, I mean, you have the Comfey and the Latios. You can proc policy there if you really want to go for that, or even with the Garchomp. You could even go for a coaching Cinderace into the Garchomp as well and do some damage there. You have the Urshifu, like we run in all sorts of different regards. You have Spiritomb, which even though I don't hold Spiritomb in very high regard, it does have some decent support moves to help the rest of the team move along. I think this team overall just has such a diverse breadth of offense that teams preparing for on a week-by-week basis aren't able to account for every avenue it takes, and it's able to take great advantage of that going into the matchup.
And to add on to that, like, I don't think even with that preparation, they have to be strong enough to address the Celesteela. It's at an 83% usage for a reason. I almost feel like I miscounted, and it should be at like 100%. I'm not sure. But we even saw, I'll mention Bazuk again. That week 3 match. While they all end to take out the Celesteela early in, I think, both games, it was just not enough to overcome the overall offense of the team. Like I mentioned, someone's always there to pick up the slack. You take out Celesteela, well, Garchomp is still a huge threat for your team. And there's enough support to, like with Tailwind or with Comfey, to just still kind of run through you.
Exactly. There's so many pieces to take advantage of here, and not many resources, honestly, to defend against. It's difficult. It's really difficult, and I think they've put together a really nice team here. My only criticism, truly, would be on the defensive side. I do feel as though if a team is able to slow down that offense initially, you do begin to see some of the weaknesses in some of these mons not being able to take like super effective hits super well, or even just having their offense slow down entirely. There's not much going for you on the defensive side.
Yeah.
If you're not also applying that pressure.
I'm with you. And it's kind of difficult getting to that point, though. That's why I kind of rate it as an A tier. So
agreed.
Yeah, hopefully everybody else agrees with me on that one. All right, Professor Walnut, if you're still in the chat, it's time to talk smack about you, okay? All right. I actually talked a little bit about this like during the actual drafting phase. All right, so one of the things that I valued about Spectrier, the reason I said I would have picked it if I were entering in the draft, near the end of Series 9, I believe, it was Registeel was creating some waves. Like you had your Iron Defense, Amnesia, Body Press movesets. So if you ever reach the end of the game where all of your offensive resources were spent and you still have to deal with it, the one I'll say the main Pokemon that could deal with it very easily is Spectrier, because it was running mostly a supportive set with a Will-O-Wisp. So with that, Registeel would just like slowly burn away without being able to touch the Spectrier at all. So I think that was a cool pickup for early in the draft. And from there, they picked a bunch of unique Pokemon that I think typically you would overlook. So like Porygon Z, a strong Pokemon in its own right, a little bit difficult to use since it's less durable than the Porygon 2 with Eviolite. They picked up Galarian Moltres. Again, another, I would say, difficult Pokemon to use just because like it can be strong, but its base stats in comparison to like other offensive threats is not quite there until you activate its Berserk ability. And then also, since Togekiss was already picked, I believe, you still have access to Togetic as a redirector. It's easy to forget that it can still do that job, right? Then Sableye and Ribombee. I was particularly interested in the Ribombee because overall the team itself doesn't have I don't think it has any speed control outside of Max Strike from Porygon Z. You're usually kind of falling behind in how quickly you can address things, which, considering that the team is kind of in the middle of the pack as far as like bulkiness, like you have Registeel, you have Entei, Rillaboom, all pretty like solid HP stats, but everything kind of falls from there. If you aren't able to either control the speed or properly redirect certain attacks, you're gonna fall behind pretty quickly. But with Ribombee, you have the occasional option to speed swap it. I was thinking onto Porygon Z. So week 5 against Strider, we saw exactly that, and it was able to kind of roll the team. From there, the only other comment I was going to mention is, and this is a very specific kind of quirk, Registeel, the counter to that, to doing the whole iron defense thing, would be using like Topsy Turvy from Graplocked, and he happened to like take one of the only two mons that have that move, so I thought that was pretty fun.
This team is honestly, it's such a roller coaster up and down, truth be told. You have these like two gigantic like problems thrown at the opponent with Registeel and Porygon Z. It's like, okay, here, like this is your problem now, you deal with it. And everything else on the team is kind of meant to like add a little roadblock or question amidst all of that. I think the PZ is a fantastic pickup for a draft format. I mean, there's just not very many ways to deal with redirection, hyper beam, X strikes from this monster. Absolutely insane damage. The coverage, I would say, is not the best, but it is enough to power through enough matchups if piloted correctly, though the problem is, of course, piloting such a tricky team at times can be very difficult. And sometimes if you're playing towards this Registeel endgame, you're not always going to get there if the opponent has, a checkmate in the back, like we spoke of earlier, a Spectre or something in that regard. So I do think it is a little bit tricky to maneuver. But if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be Professor Walnut, and I think they have the capabilities to do so. It's just really leveraging their team, their 6 mons, and not just hyper focusing in on the PZ or the Registeel, and really taking into account what's going to be good into a particular matchup week by week.
Right, and now you can see they kind of had a rough start to this season, so they're currently at number 8 on the leaderboard. That's not the main reason that I put it at a B- tier. I would say the main reason is we've kind of like lightly touched on it, but it's a difficult to pilot team. So like all the win conditions that it's looking for, whether it's snowballing with Porygon Z or reaching an end game where Registeel or even Galarian Moltres cleans up, I think it's really tough to find that position for you. Also, I'm just now realizing there is a little bit of a mistake in the week 6, week 7 matchups coming up for Professor Walnut. I've probably made this mistake for some of the other ones, but they're gonna be matching up against Sanaito in week 6, the current number 1, and in week number 7 they're gonna be up against Eeveenescence. Speaking of Sanaito, one of the regular players that just talk shop and discuss strategy with, currently picked up a pretty decent win to reach number 1, and I'm giving their team an A- rating in light of that. So one thing that I think a lot of people consistently, whether it's the Draft League, whether it's the normal ladder, Series 12, 11, 10, 9, whatever, I think a lot of people end up overlooking Zapdos as one of the stronger Pokemon in the format. Just the general, what's the best way to put it? It puts on so much pressure as an electric flying type Pokemon, because typically water types are going to be common in a draft, well, not a draft format, but in general. It addresses that while also having access to max airstream, with a decent base 100 stat to capitalize off of that from. I don't think a lot of players are prepared to properly defend against Zapdos, so it can definitely run away with some games if supported and positioned properly. Even here, you can see Zapdos has come to every single one of Sanaito's games, whether in the front or the back, just to kind of give a testament to his versatility. Also, I do see the chat. Just want to go through this list really quick, and I can address anything after that. Sorry about that. All right. But aside from Zapdos, even though that's like a big part of how this team makes an impact, it also has access to Gmax, Colossal, and Sneasel, which up until this series was a kind of a strong combination. Normally you use like Aqua Jet over Sneasel just to make sure there weren't any problems with speed tiers, but you're able to get away with that a little bit easier, since only one team's going to have Regieleki, one team's going to have the Spectrier. So Sneasel just kind of gets off scouts free, provides the Surf to activate the Steam Engine, so Colossal can potentially roll over teams. Now, where I think the big value in this team lies is its flexibility, in that, yes, you could do Surf Sneasel into Colossal, or you could do Barraskewda Aquajet into Colossal, or you could do Barraskewda sitting next to Politoed, and the list kind of goes on for a couple of other different strategies. So take the idea that Bazuk's team has, where you have these two Pokemon synergies, but you put it all the way across the board. Like, one Pokemon could synergize with 3 others, and those could synergize with 2 others, and you can still have a very cohesive unit overall. But just in just in the context of how Sanaito's operated, it's been mostly the Zapdos show. Sitting next to Indeedee, it just causes havoc, and it's hard to touch because of the Indeedee. And then as a backup plan, you surf with Sneasel versus the Colossal and just start steamrolling.
Yeah, when I first looked at Sanaito's team going into this draft, I don't hold Colossal in very high regard in a draft format, but I do think, as you mentioned before, a huge benefit of this team, and we've kind of said the same thing about other teams in the past, but I think the difference with Sanaito's is that his offense is either A, incredibly deadly, and even if we are able to, kill the Colossal after one turn, getting its Vocalith off, like, the Vocalith still exists. Or B, the Zapdos, it's just defensively and offensively so incredibly strong, and I can't help but reiterate, I don't understand how it goes by in every single format. Like, this mon is absolutely insane, as far as defensive and offensive capabilities. And the great part is, to top it all off, that Sneasel being able to pair with the Cole, going for the Surf, or being able to pair with the Zapdos, going for fake tiers. You get the triple Axle, you get the fake out and certain things, Icy Wind as well. There's just so much support between those two main offensive roles, and the opponent is truly not able to defend against both of them with a specific lead. And then you factor in, additionally, the support of a mon like Torracat or Indeedee or the Politoed there with helping hand strategies. And you turn into this team that, while on the forefront looks very top heavy in terms of its offense, it's just, you have to put so much respect into his offense that you're unable to properly prepare your own offense in a way, or defend against some of the support mons that he has on the team as well.
Enough said. Number 1 for a reason, but still 2 more matches to see if they can maintain it, which I think there's a strong possibility of doing so, but it's going to be up to Sanaito to prove that to us. Alright, last on the list, we got Strider. I put them at the top of the list the last time that I went through this. Let me see. Yeah, they were on my my A tier for the previous list. They're still high up there now. Just what's kind of holding it back has been the performance, particularly in recent weeks. Both their losses, they went 0-2 after kind of an impressive starts from weeks 1 through 3. What I like most about this team is that it's very straightforward. Like, if you've heard me or seen me talk about this, I kind of praise flexibility and diversity to be able to adjust for different weeks. But this is kind of like a closed system. Like, you have your typical sun pieces, Torkoal, Venusaur, Charizard, right? Supplemented by Landorus, Therian, and Rotom Wash, pretty much addresses pretty much any of the weaknesses that normally plague that type of team, to just make it very streamlined, so you don't really have to think a ton about what you want to do. And if anything, you make small adjustments depending on the matchup. So against a physical heavy team, you have Hitmontop in the back to use Intimidate to kind of help your Fibbits a little bit. And while I'm not that big of a fan, you could even say something like Goodra can come in versus rain teams to help shore that up. You're not really too worried since you have Venusaur and Rotom Wash on your side, but adding an extra layer of insulation doesn't help. Like even Shedinja under the right conditions also helps to serve that purpose. The issue that they run into, and you can see that mainly recently, defensively, if it runs into the wrong matchup, again, bringing up the whole Latias situation from week 4, there's not a lot to really bring it back from the clutches of defeat. Like you can see how much they were struggling coming into that 0-2 on week 4. And then also speed control. This is not a team that really wants to utilize Trick Room at all. And even under high speeds, you're really only dealing with Venusaur at the immediate level, like activating that on Chlorophyll. Not any access to Tailwind, no access to Prankster, Thunderwave, or Scary Face. Anything meant to get a speed advantage is going to come off the back of Airstream from Landorus Therian or Charizard. You can kind of resolve that if you want to use Thunderwave on Rotom Wash in certain scenarios, but still, that's not like a quick access to it. It's something that you're going to end up having to wait for.
It's true. I think my biggest criticism of this team, and something that I hold in high regard, given how I think well put together this team is, I would love to see a better preparation week to week, honestly. I think that some of the sets that are run, whether it be Landorus, Venusaur, Charizard, whatever, these are all very, very strong, flexible pieces that with, I believe, the proper preparation into each specific matchup could shine even greater. We've seen, I believe, the White Herb Lando, and we've seen the Assault Vest Landorus, and I mean, those are the two variants that we've mainly seen throughout the league. But I would love to see more diversity and flexibility between all mons across the board, because I think the pieces are truly there for every single match. I mean, Sun has been a staple of VGC for so many years now, and this is practically the best Sun team you're going to get in a draft format with all these different pieces, whether it be the Rotom Wash, the Landorus, the Torkoal, everything. You even have the Hitmontop for added Intimidate pressure should you need it. So I would love to see going into these last couple weeks, preparing properly, closing out with the wins, and hopefully being able to clinch a top 3, top 4 spot.
Not really too much to say from there about this. Again, just with it being so very streamlined, so concise, it's really hard to create any variation, and then it's kind of like a double-edged sword. In one hand, it's strong without having to make too many changes. On the other hand, where you do need to make changes, there's not a lot to make that happen, in my opinion.
It's true. I think the mons you bring to with this team, especially, you're almost guaranteed bringing the same 5 every single week. With that being the Venusaur, Charizard, Rotom Wash, Landorus, and Torkoal, most likely. It's really in that 6th slot, I think, that you have the flexibility to manipulate with the team and what you want to bring.
All right, and that's all 12 players, and our opinions over their drafts, their play style, what they can do to better prepare for these last couple of weeks in this format. Now, anything extra, if you want to check out this document, I did put a link in the title. Also, when I upload this to YouTube, I'll put it in the description as well. But it's just basically going over like what I'm looking for when I'm evaluating these teams, and what it comes down to mainly is how flexible does it allow these players to operate. Again, prime example is Mocha's team. Yes, their highest pick rate, Pokemon are Spectre, Grimmsnarl, Metagross, and Swampert. Collectively, those on their own make a relatively solid team overall. You could theoretically bring that consistently, like week after week, even as part of a whole six Pokemon team. But the fact that if they are expecting some trouble against ground type moves, now you can pivot towards Salamence and Moltres. If they're expecting trouble with water type moves, now you can pivot into the Credilli, into the Rotom. if they think the opponent has like kind of scoped out the whole bulldoze into metagross strategy, you have the opportunity to use coaching from Pheromosa to beef up metagross, or even like a physical Salamence. There's like so much that you can do. You can have like one core strategy that's really solid and works, but then you have so many other options that you can just kind of cater into what you're trying to do. And you can see where teams begin to suffer when you don't have that same type of flexibility, such as we just went over it with Strider's team, where yes, it's strong on its own with its core, but when you'll run into a wall versus particular matchups that you can't really prepare against. And then the last thing I wanted to go over is how easy it is to use. That's where Strider's team excels. Sun is very apparent in what it wants to do, what it can do. When you compare that to something like Professor Walnut's team, while it has several ideas that can work, getting to that point where your win conditions are met are really difficult. So that's where the opinion of the team can lower, unless it's balanced out by the actual results. Okay. So yeah, that's all that I want to go over in this regard. Hopefully it's helpful, insightful, or entertaining. So eventually I'll get this up to YouTube. Probably gonna chill on the stream for a little bit, but Manny, did you have anything you want to go over?
No, I think they're pretty much covered for the most part. I mean, these teams have definitely not shaped out in the way that I originally expected. There's definitely a lot of drafts that have changed, and just like overall play styles that I did not see coming. But I'm really excited to see how it closes out, truth be told. I think there are a lot of contenders for this top 6. And it's going to shape out pretty nicely, I believe.
Agreed. Once again on the screen are the standings currently. I'm honestly, this is the homie at number 1, so I'm actually impressed that they made it to this point. There was some slip ups from the previous top spots, but going into the playoffs, so far the team's looking strong, especially with some adjustments that were made. But again, just comes down to what happens in the next couple of weeks. Either way, that's it for me. I'll get this up to YouTube. Probably going to do a couple of things on the stream for a little bit while I'm at it, so if you guys want to stick around, that's perfectly fine. For the YouTube video though, we'll catch you next time. This past week rather, everyone was off due to the Indie Regional, so this video will be uploaded in place of my usual weekly report, and then we'll get back on top of that with week 6's report next week. Till then, take it easy.